A robot who had just finalized its divorce paperwork left the scientist utterly perplexed. How could a robot possibly have a wife? However, as the robot began to explain, the scientist was stunned by what he heard.
My wife's name is Laura.
It turns out that this robot was once a cold-blooded, ruthless war machine, dispatched countless times to the front lines of battle. But during one particularly dangerous mission, it didn't fire a single shot. Even more bizarre was the fact that, in order to protect enemy soldiers, the robot actually used an electromagnetic pulse weapon against its own allies, instantly paralyzing all friendly forces within a 1-kilometer radius. An investigation into the robot's actions was immediately launched. The scientists first asked where the electromagnetic pulse had come from, as the military had never equipped them with such a weapon. The robot, however, seemed clueless, claiming it had just woken up and knew nothing about it. The scientist felt this was a blatant lie. After all, robots don't sleep or dream, do they? Surprisingly, the robot admitted that it did indeed dream, and that it had dreamt of its wife and children, as if it were human. The scientist, growing increasingly irritated, repeatedly emphasized to the robot that it was nothing more than a war machine and needed to stop fantasizing about a human family. But the robot refused to listen, instead insisting that its wife's name was War. This was the last straw for the scientist. Fed up with the robot's nonsensical claims, he threatened to erase all of its memories of its family if it didn't tell the truth. The robot, enraged, flipped over the table in front of it and began walking menacingly towards the scientist. Suddenly, the entire interrogation room started to warp and distort. In a flash, the scene changed, and the scientist woke up from the consciousness extractor. It turned out that he hadn't been interrogating the robot for real, but rather had entered its consciousness. The scientist quickly stood up and walked over to the glass wall in front of him, gazing at the first prototype robot he had developed. It was then that he finally revealed the truth. In order to secure a lucrative military contract, the scientist had secretly implanted the consciousness of the deceased into these cold metal bodies, erasing all of their emotions to create an army of ruthless war machines. However, for some unknown reason, they had begun to gradually recover the original memories of the deceased. That's why the scientist had entered their consciousness in search of answers. But at that very moment, the robot's energy levels suddenly spiked, instantly paralyzing the research institute's power system. The scientist realized what was happening, but it was already too late. The robot was breaking free from its restraints and heading straight towards the scientist with a fierce, menacing look in its eyes.